Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 36 of the Masterclass. My name is still Cam, and I'm still across the table from Dave.
That's the way it should be.
Yes. You realize that we always sit on the same side of the table?
Sure.
We should mix it up next week.
Okay.
It's going to change my perspective drastically. But anyways, we are here. We're 2 days late, but you know, I was back home in Detroit and Dave had some work stuff. So we are recording now and you were listening now. Although in a weird time-lapse continuum, now for us is different than now for you, but it's still now.
It's the future.
Yes, we are time travelers, Dave.
I love it.
But anyways, this is episode 36 and we have a lot to discuss today. So I'm just going to dive right in. We mentioned, I believe it was 2 episodes ago in episode 34, that Crossway was putting together a documentary about J.I. Packer and his life. And they had kind of teased these little video vignettes about Packer answering very specific questions. But they have released the full documentary. It's only like 18 minutes long. I was expecting something much longer based on how they were advertising it. But if you go to crossway.org/JIPacker, you can watch that documentary in full, and I would encourage it. Like I said, it's only like 17 or 18 minutes long, but it's a really cool look at a guy who is looking back on his life and is doing his best to encourage the next generation to finish well. Mm-hmm. And that's what I got out of it. Is he's not bragging about his life. And actually, if you hear some of his stories, he's quite lucky to even be alive.
Oh.
Now, let alone when he was, maybe my age.
Yeah.
And just his heart for the Word of God, his heart for teaching Christians to understand the Bible, is really something that encouraged me. And so if you go to that link, which we'll have in the show notes, you can watch the documentary, but it also has I think there's like 10 little like 2 or 3 minute videos where he's answering questions like, what is church unity? What is the gospel? Why is prayer important? Which are also very, very helpful, especially if you're leading like a Bible study and you are talking about like prayer. Mm-hmm. Here's J.I. Packer in 3 minutes teaching more than I could teach in 2 hours about what prayer is like. So definitely worth your while to go and watch and then, perhaps use as a resource in whatever setting you choose. But we wanted to make sure that you're aware of that because I really like J.I. Packer.
Yep.
So does Dave. So it is officially Masterclass recommended.
Seal of approval.
Mm-hmm. Big old fat M stamped on it. All right. So that's that. How about some follow-up, Dave?
Okay.
I mentioned dispensationalism last episode, as in the article we referenced that wasn't very helpful, and this guy pretty much just disregards dispensationalism as something that's just too ridiculous to even consider, if I'm remembering correctly. It has been like 9 days. So I linked to the Wikipedia article on dispensationalism because when you want to learn about theology, Dave, where else would you go besides Wikipedia?
I know.
But this article is actually pretty helpful because it has lots of charts.
Good, yeah.
And so you can see like there's a 3-step, a 5-step, and a 7 or 8-step version of the dispensations in the Bible. Mm-hmm. That it shows exactly, book, chapter, or verse, depending on where the break is, how different dispensationalists view the different dispensations. So I guess I should step back a second and explain what dispensationalism is, since that's the whole point of this follow-up.
That would be good.
So the basic, very general summation of dispensationalism is that God has related to human beings in different ways under different biblical covenants in a series of dispensations or periods in history. So this is saying in, dispensation A, God related to human beings in such and such a way. Then later on in dispensation B, he related to human beings in this new or different way. And then in dispensation C, D, E, F, or G, he changed to do things that way. And so obviously, the 3 major, I'm going to look this up real quick so I don't speak incorrectly. The 3-step dispensation starts with, I'm scrolling. The law, which I guess would be an easy guess. So that is based on this, chart, the very beginning of the Bible through the birth of the church. So essentially, the entire Old Testament is one dispensation under this 3-step rule. Then there's the dispensation of grace, which is the church age. So the beginning of the New Testament through the rapture, which, who knows when that is. And then the third is after the rapture, which is the kingdom. So it's a very simple breakdown. It gets a little more individualized or granular as you go up the steps, to the point where in the 7 or 8 step one, Genesis 1, 2, and 3 is a dispensation. Genesis 3 through 8 is a different dispensation. Genesis 9 through 11 is yet another one. Genesis 12 through Exodus 19 is another. Exodus 20 through the rest of the Old Testament is a different dispensation. Then there's the church age. Then there's the millennial kingdom. Then there's the eternal state or final. So dispensations that haven't even happened yet, but are theoretically alluded to in Scripture. So that is that. And then just to, I guess, make a funny point here, it says that estimates of the number of people who hold dispensationalist beliefs vary in the United States, vary between 5 and 40 million people alone. So even if we take the most conservative approaches, 5 million people think that dispensationalism is real. But this guy who wrote the article is just like, yeah, nope, stupid. Nope, not even worth talking about. Bye. So that is a very, very, very quick overview of dispensationalism. If you've heard of the Scofield Reference Bible, that is a very dispensationalist Bible as far as the commentary and such that is within it. That's probably the biggest reference as I read through the article I saw. There's a bunch of other names that I was not as familiar with.
I did not know that.
And not to sound cocky, but if I'm not familiar with them, I doubt that the non-theologically trained person would be. Unless, of course, they grew up in a dispensationalist background, in which case they would probably know more about it than I would.
Sure.
So that is a very, very quick overview of dispensationalism.
Yes.
All right. Next, we talked about death last week.
Mm-hmm.
And we got a response from Jerome. And there was a lot in this response. But before we dive into specifically, we'll just dive in. Jerome was not pleased with how Dave and I discussed the intricacies of dealing with the death of a loved one. And so, first of all, I want to apologize. I did not mean to offend or upset listeners. I went back and listened to everything that I said. And I think that I was certainly a little bit more flippant than I should have been. One of the things that I'm guilty of is when I see something as very black and white or very, distinct, I can tend to treat it a lot more lightheartedly than I should, especially when it's a topic that a lot of people probably don't see as black and white as I do. And so before we even get into the details of the feedback and what was said, I just want to say I did not mean to be flippant or
glib.
Well, not even glib, but just I did not mean to speak so lightly about something that is clearly a heavy topic. So for that, I do apologize. And another thing is I went back and listened to it, and I made it seem that crying at a funeral is a bad thing, which is not at all what I intended to say. What I meant is that there's a difference. There's a strong difference between grieving and sorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And that oftentimes, in my experience, I have seen Christians acting out of sorrow and not grief. And the difference to me there is that when someone acts in sorrow, there is no hope. It is done. It's final. And their actions, their anger, their emotion is out of this place of, I'm never going to see this person again. This is it. Game over. And it's awful. It's tragic, right?
Mhm.
Whereas when people act in grief, it is the emotional response to not having your loved one in your life anymore.
Mhm.
And to the point Jerome makes in his email, that it's not so much about just not having that person and having the pain of remembering them, but it's also the memories that you're not going to be able to make with them as you go forward. And Jerome mentions in his email, his father died very tragically, which I can't imagine, because I've never, my dad's still around.
Mhm.
And so I can't even begin to imagine, and it happened to him when he was in college. So still young enough, that having your dad around is something that you really want and desire, but old enough to realize, like, this changes things, big time, more than I can understand. Um, and now I forget. Now I'm caught up thinking about my dad, and I forgot where I was going to go with that. Um, what was I going to say, Dave?
Don't know.
You don't know?
No,
Oh,
I'm
man.
sorry.
Okay, so wow, I really screwed the pooch on that. I wish I could pause and rewind, but the show must go on. Anyways, Dave, start talking. I seriously, my brain just stopped thinking.
Yeah, and I guess for me, my piece was, it's not healthy for your life to become like basically an ongoing ritual to be dedicated to honoring the person that you've lost. I think you need to continue to grieve, and I think you need to grieve for years, decades, beyond when you lost that person. But it's like this, there's a lot of effort that really has to go into mourning and grieving. And when you're constantly almost kind of living in the past and trying to keep that alive, I don't think that's healthy. But I think, kind of like you mentioned, grieving a future event that you'd hope to share with that person. Certainly think that is a healthy, thing to do. So yeah, I guess that was just sort of, I wasn't in the moment of grieving someone or mourning like you were. And so as we were talking about it, that was just kind of the thing that came to my mind, is just, I've been around people where I felt like their primary purpose in life had become mourning the loss of this person. And that's really not what mourning is about. It really is about bringing closure and bringing an end to things. And it doesn't mean that it won't resurface and you won't experience it again. But it is not something that should be ongoing throughout life, or maybe ongoing is the wrong way to say that. It shouldn't be a non-ceasing, that never stops. It's just a constant. So anyway, we need to progress in our grief, and it needs to move us forward versus taking us backwards. So that was my piece and my what I was thinking as we were talking about it. So did you think of what you wanted to say?
No. I have other things to say.
Move on.
I'm sure I'll go back and listen to this episode and say, that's exactly. So perhaps I will share that next episode. I think one of the really good things that Jerome brings up, he shares a lot of his story with us in this email. But one of the things that he brings up is that American society, he says, fails terribly at grieving appropriately. That most people suppress or ignore their grief to the detriment of those and those around them. And then he says, you can see this expressed whenever a celebrity dies. A big part of the reason that people were so sad about Robin Williams' death was not they were grieving him. They may have thought they were grieving him, but they were subconsciously grieving lost friends and family members. And Williams' death just reopened the wound that was already there. It had not been allowed to heal properly. And I think that he's on to something, at least as far as we're not we we don't know how to handle death.
No, we've removed it from our world.
It's like it's one of those things that's like, especially like within the church, it's like sex and death you just don't talk about. Like, yay, Jesus came back from the dead, death's defeated, but that's like it. You know, when Ty's wife Lisa was dying of cancer, she had a book called Dying Well, and it was this guy who was engaging. I've not read it, but based on what Ty told me about it, it's a theological discussion about what the Bible says about death. And Ty, for a long time, wouldn't touch the book because it freaked him out. He didn't want to admit that his wife was dying of cancer, even though it was obvious to everybody. And granted, it went really fast at the end. We all thought she had a lot longer to live than she did, and went really quickly. But it was only after that she passed away that he was able to read that book and start to engage with what it means to die as a Christian, and what death really means. And so I think one of the things that I've learned just in even talking about this last week and getting the response back that we did from Jerome is that there needs to be a much more open and engaging discussion about death within the church.
Yeah.
Because if any place should have that, you would think it'd be the one place that celebrates the fact that death has been defeated.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we should live our lives as death is the focus. I mean, we should be preparing ourselves for death. I mean, I'm living this life so that when I die, I'm ready for the next stage of my life. And we don't do that. I mean, we really should live our lives anticipating death in a positive way. And I'm not going to say I was always that place, but I can genuinely say that, you know, I mean, I welcome that experience. You know, I don't look forward to the dying process, especially if it's uncomfortable and, you know, something like cancer that goes on. But to me, dying very much is a anticipation of going to the next where I'm supposed to be. So,
well, I don't think this is the last time we'll talk about this.
Oh, probably not.
But I do want to say to Jerome, thank you for taking the time to write that email, and for being upfront and honest with us about how you felt that we handled the topic, and your response to it. Know that we do very much appreciate the fact that you took the time to call us on a number of things, and that we did take it to heart. So the conversation's not over, but we just wanted to say thank you for doing that. And we look forward to continuing the conversation with you and with anybody else that would care to chime in, because this is not a topic that is so easily handled. And it is certainly one that needs to be discussed more with a lot of grace, but certainly a topic that I think the church needs to do a much better job at making not so taboo, if I can use that word.
Sure.
No, thank you for the permission, David. That's what I was seeking for this whole time. All right. Any other thoughts on anything before we dive into the scriptures for today?
No other thoughts.
All right. Well, you can talk now.
Oh, again.
I have to take a drink. I'm parched.
You're parched. Well, do you want me to go ahead and read the verse that we have for tonight?
I would.
All right. So we're going to move on to Matthew 10:26 through 33. And it reads, "So have no fear of them, for nothing is covered that will not be revealed, or hidden that will not be known. What I tell you in the dark, say in the light, and what you hear whispered, proclaim on the housetops. And do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather fear him who destroyed both soul and body in hell. And not two sparrows sold for a penny, and not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father. But even the hairs of your head are all numbered. Fear not, therefore, you are of more value than many sparrows. So everyone who acknowledges me before men, I will also acknowledge before my Father who is in heaven. But whoever denies me before men, I will deny before my Father who is in heaven." The end.
Thank you, kind sir. All right, so this is a continuation
Mm-hmm.
of what we've been talking about for the last few episodes, and I actually think it ties really well into our discussion last week and this week about death and um, all of that. So, if you haven't or you're not really familiar with the verses that precede this, you can go ahead and hit pause now. And no, seriously, hit pause, and we'll still be here. I promise.
Yes.
It's a recording. We're not going anywhere. And just refresh. Read from. Hold on. Let me back up here. Read from about verse 16 through 33, and that will give you a better idea of what we covered last week and the week before, and what we're going to cover today. And so essentially, this is Jesus. He is sending out the disciples into the world to go do stuff.
Yes.
Go do miracles, go preach the gospel to the people of Israel, all this stuff. And then he says, do all this great stuff. Oh, by the way, all of this real crappy stuff's probably going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is kind of like his crescendo towards the end. Like you thought it was bad before, they're gonna persecute you. If they think the teacher is the devil, then what are they gonna say about the people that follow him? That sort of stuff. So after he does that, he just says, "So just don't be afraid of them."
Right.
And then he says this sort of cryptic stuff: "For nothing is covered that will not be revealed, or hidden that will not be known. What I tell you in the dark, say in the light, and what you hear whispered, proclaim from the housetops." It's very kind of, as Jesus is wont to do, not clear, and you really have to kind of read between the lines.
Mm-hmm.
So I ask you, David, what do verses 26 and 27 mean in the context of this passage, in this greater context in Matthew chapter 10, as he's prepping the disciples to go out into the world?
I think his expectation of them is to continue on with what he is doing. And I think there's even maybe a little bit of shifting gears in a sense, in that Jesus proclaimed the kingdom of heaven, and he did it pretty freely, without reservation. But there was often you didn't get the sense that was necessarily his purpose. In terms of, he would say things and he'd be like, okay, now don't tell anybody what happened, and, keep quiet on this. And even when the mobs would kind of get unruly and he would need to get away and things like that. And, I think he knew he had this different purpose, and that when he left, he was going to hand the baton off to the disciples. And I think there's kind of an element of going, okay, you've seen me be a little bit reserved here and kind of, well, the words that are there, it says, nothing is covered that will not be revealed, or hidden that will not be known. And he's now saying, I tell you, say in the light what you hear whispered, proclaim on the housetop. So he's kind of like going, okay, it's your guys' time to start really spreading this message and proclaim it and do it boldly. And again, his purpose was to usher in the kingdom of heaven, die for our sins, and take our place and become, conquer death. And now it's the disciples' turns to advance the kingdom and spread the gospel. And it's like, okay, we've gone from this to now you need to start doing that. And well, I'll wait till we get to the next verse. So yeah, their job is to take it to that next level, I guess, is kind of what I see going on here. What were your thoughts?
Very different. I hadn't thought about it that way. I was thinking of it like he said that these people are going to do lots of potentially bad stuff, right?
Right.
You're going to be persecuted, you're going to not be welcome, you're going to be treated, badly. But then he says, but don't be afraid of them, because everything that happened is going to be revealed. Everything that you thought was just the private insults, or, nothing that happens to you is going to go forgotten.
Right.
That's kind of how I'm reading this.
Sure.
So like that's verse 26. Don't be afraid of them. And it gets a little clearer down later on in the verse, but or in the passage, don't be afraid of the people that are going to persecute you or call you out or ridicule you or tell you you're stupid or whatever, because everything that is done is going to be revealed, and in that revealing, it's going to be dealt with. Where it says, or nothing is hidden that will not be known. Like God will, just because it's going bad now, does not mean that God will not reveal it and know it in due time. And I think that's one of the hardest struggles we have, especially like when you approach the like the problem of evil. Why do bad things happen to good people?
Mhm.
Why does God allow evil things to happen? And my best answer is because.
Right.
It is not for us to know now why crap happens the way that it does.
Right.
It is for God to know and for God to rectify and justify in his time. And a lot of people tell you that's a cop-out, as if they have the answer to everything right now.
Mm-hmm. Which we don't.
No, and we never will, and that's the point. But there's this insatiable desire in the human mind to know everything and to be God of the universe ourselves, right? We have to know, and like, again, I've got nothing against science. I love science, technology, medicine,
Mm-hmm.
cars, houses, architecture, physics, all that stuff. Great. Not the best at it. I was okay at physics. Biology, mitochondria, and I was out. Like, game over. I don't know anything else. Zygote, that's something, isn't it?
It is something.
Anyways. But at one point, everyone thought the world was flat.
Right.
And that was the pinnacle of knowledge. And then we realized it wasn't, and everything changed. And I don't understand people, and please, educate me on this, that base life upon human knowledge as we know it now, because it's always changing, right? There's always new things we're learning.
Yes.
We were right about this. We were really wrong about that. It is all, and that's what science's job is to figure out what is empirically true and what is not, right?
Right.
What is this made out of? Let's figure it out. What happens when we mix this with that? Why do our bodies function the way that they do? Why do the stars align themselves? All of those things, science is seeking the truth in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's very good. We need that stuff. Life is much better because of that stuff.
Well, I think it was God's intention for
us to be curious,
to
like
discover
that. Exactly.
It, yeah.
But my trip up with that is when human knowledge, which is a very changing and shifting thing, becomes the bar with which we judge everything else by. Because who knows, in 10 years, what we were judging everything by today could be seen in a much different light.
Right.
Either a much truer light or a much falser light. And so one of the benefits that we have as Christians is that God doesn't change. The bar by which we measure everything has been static for eternity.
Yeah.
So there is no shadow of changing with thee. What hymn is that? Great is thy faithfulness.
Yeah, great is thy faithfulness.
When he says don't fear them, because everything that is covered is going to be revealed. Everything that is hidden is going to be known, because at the end of the day, the buck stops at that line.
Yeah.
And that line has not changed. It's just a matter of whether or not we choose to believe that line exists.
Right. Because the things about science, biology, physics, and all that, those have been true since the beginning of time. We didn't create.
We're just catching up.
Yeah. We didn't create anything. We just figured out what God already
through
knew.
A lot of trial and error.
Right.
Yeah. And so my problem with the problem of evil is that people think it's a problem. Does that make any sense?
Well, I think it is a problem, isn't it? Not for God.
No, and that's my point, is that we are trying to solve an eternal problem with very temporal logic.
Yeah.
And so to me, the problem of evil got solved on the cross. God created the world, man rebelled. There's one solution for the problem. God accomplishes that solution.
Mm-hmm.
And so now, why do good things happen to bad people? Because God has not yet decided it's time to fix everything.
Mm-hmm.
That's the answers to me, to the problem of evil and to the problem of why we shouldn't fear what these people can do to us. As we get down further, we're going to, get to verse 28.
Right.
and 29 and 31, that there's a lot more going on here than just these disciples going out and talking about the gospel. Like there is some serious um, anthropology and theology going on in these verses about what God is saying about him and about mankind and the value that they're in. So all of that to say, I got way ahead of myself there, but I couldn't help it, Dave. I'm getting excited that if we are Christians and if we believe what the Bible says and if we believe that God is who he says he is and that Jesus was who he says he was / is / will always be, we have to act out of trust in God and not out of fear in what the world could do to us.
Right. Oh, definitely.
And that is way easier said than done. Please don't misunderstand me. But we have to start somewhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so for the disciples, they had to start with just going out to these Jewish towns and proclaiming the gospel and dealing with what came their way, trusting that Jesus was leading them in the right direction.
Yes.
They were following that bar that doesn't change. They weren't going with the whims and waves of cultural, fads or trends or, I mean, mustaches are back in style, Dave.
So are man buns. Well, not back in style, but probably first ever in style.
But my point is, these things
culture is the wrong thing to base our
exactly
faith on.
Right, and that's why we rely on God is this never changing,
right,
like guide through all of the things in life that change.
Mm-hmm.
What's cool, what's not, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. I mean, you even look at the cultural acceptance of homosexuality as a viable, okay, way to be. This is not the first time that's happened.
No.
This has happened in societies where it was frowned upon, where it was totally okay, and everything in between. And the cultures have ebbed and flowed over the centuries and millennia, where, certain societies thought it was great, certain societies thought it was the devil, and everything in between. And it's not this great revelation of America to accept this sort of stuff. It's the ebb and flow of culture.
Yeah.
And throughout all of that,
generally cultures that have found homosexuality acceptable don't tend to last much longer. Not really it tends to be an outward sign of kind of, we've headed down this path of accepting things that God never intended. And I think that's kind of maybe a better way to put it is we God has what is best for us and what his design is. And we start to choose against God's best. And that's how I guess I view, the situation with homosexuality is we start to choose against what God's best is for us. So.
But we know better, Dave.
Hopefully.
Because human knowledge is always good. All right. Next question. Let's move on into the meat or the center of what's going on in this passage. Verse 28, I think puts life into some serious perspective. And for reference, verse 28 says, "Do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell." What can we do to remember the truth that God is the only one that we should fear when it comes to something as important as life or death?
Well, I think one of the things is you take a look at the 12 disciples who initially followed Jesus. And you've got Judas committed suicide. And then the other 11 were all killed for 10 of the other 11 were all killed for their faith.
Yeah, John just got sent to timeout.
John gets to be a miserable old man on an island who didn't exactly have it easy.
Him and Tom Hanks.
Wilson! you take a look at Paul, who was converted as an apostle and wrote much of our New Testament, and so I guess for me, one of the things I look at is I look at the people who are closest to Jesus, knew him the best, and what it was that he sent them out to do, and they very much lived and died with that perspective of, kill the body because the soul has an eternal place. And, if we really, really believe in eternity and the idea of going to heaven or to hell, I guess I'll just speak for me personally. You would think that my behavior would be drastically different than what it is if I, really do believe that, which I do believe. I believe it, but yet I allow fear to have too much influence over me and what I do and don't do. And what's even really stupid about that is it's really not even about whether I live or die. It's almost more about whether people like me or not. So,
that's true though. If you think about it, I mean, there is, in my experience growing up, and Dave and I are far enough apart in age that our experiences in middle school and high school and college were very different.
mm-hmm.
And then I'm far enough apart in age from Dave's eldest daughter that our experiences are drastically different.
Right.
But, I was able to, obviously get a really good view of Caroline's youth because I was her youth pastor
mm-hmm.
for 3.5 years. So I was dealing with all of the stuff that her and all of the other kids in the youth group were going through. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, they're only 10 years younger than I am. But things are so different. And we're 15 years apart,
right.
Dave, you and I. And so I was in high school from 2000 to 2001. Or I did all 4 years in one. Just Doogie Howser's got nothing. No, 2000, 2004. I apologize. Which really kind of was, I remember life before Facebook. As far as like being in school and being social and all that stuff. I remember when my college got Facebook. I remember when Twitter came out. I was a junior in college when the iPhone came out. So like all of these things that define life now,
mm-hmm.
8 years later, I was able to go through middle school, high school, and most of college without. Whereas someone like Caroline doesn't really have
no perspective of that.
Of what that's like.
Or just simple terms that we use have meaning in them.
Like, selfies weren't a thing when I was in college.
Well, see, but I'm thinking as much as like you dial a phone. Well, why do you dial a phone? Well, phone used to have a dial that you would actually go whoosh, and it would.
We had one of those in the basement. I would use it as often as I could. I thought it was so cool.
So you dial a phone number because there was a dial, or rolling up a window. You roll in your car. You rolled it up because there was an actual crank that you turned in a certain direction,
ages, man.
and rolled it up. And so, terms like that don't even necessarily have meaning to like because they've never experienced a car with the roll up. Well, maybe they have. I think maybe had one while they were alive, or while they were at home with me. But anyway, yeah. So there are just certain things that change the perspective. And I don't know that they've really known a world without cell phones. In fact, I don't even know that they really even know having a house phone. I mean, I think we did have house phones, but even then it was kind of a cordless phone that looked like a cell phone. Mm-hmm. Anyway, tangent. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. We're good at those. So how did we get on that?
Just age difference and.
I know, but there was a point there. I'm like 0 for 2 tonight, Dave.
you don't remember what you were doing.
No, it's my first day back at work today. I had 5 days off to go home and bury my grandpa and hang out with my family and just totally like veg out and not think about life other than just being with my family and being present to what we were doing. And I came back to work today. And as it always happens, it just hits the fan.
Yeah.
Copy machine and the money machine both jammed, like just all sorts of you're just like, oh, of course, it's my first day back. So I'm a little scatterbrained and I apologize. We did prepare, I promise. I just am failing to complete sentences, apparently, or thoughts for that matter. I really am going to listen back to this and hate myself.
I doubt it.
Anyways, I really did have a point, I promise, but it's gone. Now I'm thinking about
Well, I probably derailed you on that
before
one there.
Facebook and how blissful it was. Just kidding. Still have all the same problems we do now. We just didn't have a place to show everyone how awesome our lives are.
Yes.
Except for MySpace. Anyways, let's move on because this is going so well. All right. Verses 29 through 31 say, "Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? And not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father. But even the hairs of your head are all numbered. Fear not, therefore, you are of more value than many sparrows."
Yes.
So these verses describe in a very particular way the ultimate care that God has for us. And it may be kind of a weird way to put it because sparrows, like, really. But if you read what Jesus is saying there, it is quite a statement about how God cares for us. So how should we respond as Christians today? Not as disciples then, but assuming that what Jesus is telling the disciples there also applies to us as members of God's family, which I believe it does. How should we respond to these verses? What should they make us feel? What should they make us think? How should they change the way that we act?
I think we should live with some abandon and not be so worried about the things of the world. And I guess that's when I kind of think about the way I live versus the way I should live, or maybe that's not even the right way that I want to say that. But I just think I would live differently if I didn't get so connected to the things of this world, and really just trusted Him to provide. I don't know. Now I'm rambling here. God is going to provide for us. God is going to take care of us. Do I think that means that we shouldn't, I don't need to work because God will just take care of me? I don't need to be responsible. I don't think that's the case. I think we very much need to be diligent and be what we need to contribute to society and things like that. But the reality is when it says something like the hairs on your head are numbered, I'm sure I've lost hair this week. I couldn't tell you how many hairs I've lost, but God can. And I think one of the reasons that He chooses that example is it's something that, it's very much a part of us and personal to who we are, but yet I can't even tell you how many new gray hairs I got this week, how many hairs I lost, and that sort of thing. But God knows those sorts of details. He knows the details of sparrows falling to the ground. And simply what He is just saying in this is that things that seem trivial and small to us, He knows about us. And because He knows such intimate, small things about us, it demonstrates how much that He cares for us. And, I think if He is so aware of something that's small and relatively insignificant, then obviously He is fully aware of what is important and what really matters, and is fully in control of those kinds of things. So I think we need to truly kind of let go and let God take care of this kind of stuff, because I don't know if I've said it here before or not, but it's one of the things I feel like I've been learning a lot about God in this past year, is that the effort is up to me. Like, I need to work hard and I need to be diligent. I need to provide for my family, but ultimately the outcome is not up to me. And I think so often I try to control the outcome and make things happen. And I worry about, again, when I do a good job at work, I find I'm doing a good job because I want kudos and accolades from the boss and people that I work with. And it's not because I want to glorify God. And so, one of the ways that I believe we should respond to this truth is living a life like the outcomes aren't up to us, and that we trust Him for that outcome, and that sometimes the outcomes may not be the outcome that we want, but ultimately,
Been there.
ultimately it's the way we acknowledge that we believe that He's in God and He's in control and that He's sovereign, is by saying, God, this isn't the outcome that I wanted, but I trust You, and that either You're going to get me there or it didn't matter. And whoops, or drop my phones. That's what happened. But I trust You that You're going to get it to where I am supposed to be. So anyway.
Yes. I concur. Verse 30 to me is, I think, a verse that should really shake people, where it says that even the hairs of your head are all numbered. I mean, we are speaking about the God that has created a universe so vast we can't even really understand how big it is. Now, there are theories and equations out there that have tried to map and guesstimate the size of the universe and all of that. And we have built crazy spacecrafts and telescopes that allow us to see insanely far away from the planet, but we are unable to accurately map the size of the universe. So the same God that has built planets and stars and galaxies and all of this that is so vast and broad and enormous that even the most modern of technologies cannot comprehend the sheer mass of this thing that we call life. God still knows. That same God that created all of that still willingly knows the amount of hair on my head. One out of, what are we at, 7 billion people on the earth now, if we round up? We'll be there shortly. Just currently alive.
Right. Not just that have lived.
Not of all time. Just currently alive on this planet. The God that created the universe also knows the very details of my life. And this, this correlates to me to the Psalm where it says that, before you were even born, I knew you in your mother's womb. The intimate details that God knows about us in the grand scheme of what He has created should do nothing but communicate the ultimate love and care and intimacy He desires to have with us. I love my wife to death. She's wonderful. And I hope that we, get to spend a really, really, really long time together. I mean, we will in eternity. I couldn't tell you on a good day what color her eyes are. I don't know, because but the point is not that I'm a bad husband,
right?
Is that she is more to me than the color of her eyes. I know what she likes. I know what she doesn't like. I know her favorite foods. I know her favorite TV shows. I know what she likes to do to relax. I can tell when she's stressed. I can tell when I make her laugh or when she's just laughing to make me feel good. Like, I know these things because I care about her and I spend time with her and I want to know her more. This to me just goes like 9,500 steps further, where God is just showing me over and over again that He cares so much about me and about the people on this planet, that He knows every single detail to freakish levels about us. And that's only possible because He's the one that created us.
Right.
I could spend eternity getting to know my wife, but because I did not create her, because we are equals in the eyes of God, I'm never going to know everything about her. That's probably a good thing. But because God has created us and we are not equals, He is able to know every single thing about me, and still seeing all of my junk go, you've got value because I made you in my image and I want you as part of my family.
Yes.
So these verses to me, especially in the context of Jesus sending his disciples out into only he knows what,
Right.
is such an encouragement and such like a way to end the pregame speech, coach, because you just nailed it. Like you laid out this game plan where it could all go sideways really, really quick.
Yep.
You could piss the wrong people off and you could wind up in a ditch somewhere dead, right? But it's okay because the God of the universe intimately cares for everything about you. And in the end, no matter what happens now, everything will be set right. And the care that I have for you will go above and beyond anything you could imagine because of what I'm going to do.
Yep. Yeah. And you mentioned Psalm 139, which is exactly what I was thinking about. And it, verse 1, "O Lord, you have examined my heart and you know everything about me. You know when I sit down or stand up. You know my thoughts even when I'm far away. You see me when I travel and when I rest at home. You know everything I do." And then you mentioned verse, I think it's 13. "You made all the delicate inner parts of my body and knit me together in my mother's womb. Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. Your workmanship is marvelous. How well I know it. You watched me as I was being formed in utter seclusion, as I was woven together in the dark of the womb. You saw me before I was born. Every day of my life was recorded in your book." And it's just this, this psalm is just kind of just marveling at how much God loves us and how he does know those intimate details about us, which, by the way, I was reading from the New Living Translation, which we don't normally do. I just felt like the language was a little bit more poetic from the New Living Translation than the ESV or the NIV, which we normally read from. I don't know how often we really do that when we worship God and we just are praising him and being in awe of him, of just, it should give us incredible joy. It should bring us to worship, to know that the creator of the universe knows us as intimately as he does. So,
all right. So following up on what we just said, how can we still live in that truth that we just spoke about? God's just undying, intimate care and desire and love towards us, while we experience death, loss, and injustice here on earth. Because that is really one push comes when the rubber hits the road.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we remember, as he says, don't fear those that kill the body. I know all of this stuff about you. Fear not, you are more valued than many sparrows. How do we remember that and choose to continue to live that way when the world is just kicking us while we're down?
Mm-hmm. I think we need to be, again, we need to live with an eternal perspective versus a temporal perspective. We have these huge problems that just seem insurmountable. And it's like, well, gosh, the world's awful. It's terrible. I'm never going to change anything. I'm never going to have an influence in it. So in addition to fear, there's kind of this defeatist nature that I have. And I think one of the things that we can do, or that I feel like I am learning to do, is just to be more specific about my day, the people that I do come in contact with, and the people that I'm friends with. I don't believe that God is calling me, Dave, to go witness to complete strangers and win people over on the street. But I do believe that there are people that he's placed in my life and relationships that I'm in, that if I make an effort to get to know those people and understand the details of, maybe not even details, but just more specifics about their life, and start praying for them in specific areas of, I've got a friend with, a sick kid. Well, that is clearly something that is weighing on this person's mind and is very important to them day in and day out. And if I take the time to hear about how their child is doing and praying for that child and asking for God to work in this person's life and to work in their family's life and to work in their child's life and for them to be glorified. And if I start praying very specific and putting others first, being aware of their needs and their desires and praying for that, I guarantee God's going to show up and he's going to work in those moments. Where if I start worrying about what ISIS is doing,
Why did you bring them up?
or if I worry about, things that are going on a global scale, not saying I shouldn't pray for those things, not saying that God doesn't care about those things, and not saying that my prayers and my relationship with God can't have an impact on those things. But the reality is, it is just like he is intimate with us. And I mean that term intimate in the way of like closeness in the way God intends it to mean. I think we need to learn to be closer to those that we come to on a daily basis and not get so caught up in this big global picture, but more the smaller details of our day and our world and who we come in contact with. Because clearly if the hairs on my head matter to God, then something like a sick child of a friend matters to God. And I know that that's a place where by allowing God to work through me, he can have an impact in that person's life, whether they're a Christian or not, and bring that person to know them. Because really, that's where those things play out. That is where death plays out. That is where loss plays out. That's where injustice plays out, are in those places where we have close relationships and have the opportunity to reflect Christ to others.
Well said.
I hope.
Well, I am going to make an executive decision here,
I was
Dave,
thinking the same.
and we're going to cut it here.
Okay.
And we will start with verse 32 next episode, which will be next week.
Sounds good.
Just in respect of our listeners' time.
Yep.
So that's the end of, well, we're getting to the end. We still have a few
Verse
things to say.
36.
But
episode
36, yes, you have survived yet another round of Dave and I talking. Congratulations. Dave,
Mm-hmm.
where, if people want to find the show notes, which will be full of links and references and who knows what, where might they go to find them?
They need to go to masterclassfm.com/masterclass/36 because they will get the show notes for episode 36 by putting /36 after masterclass.
Well said.
I don't know.
You can also get in contact if you want to follow up on anything that we discussed this episode, or if you want to add to the conversation that Jerome has started about death and Christian grief and how we navigate that. We really, honestly, genuinely would like to hear your feedback, and I hope the fact that we shared how Jerome disagreed with us, and that just shows you that we're not looking for people to just tell us how awesome we are. We are genuinely looking for people that want to have a discussion, and if you think that we're wrong, tell us that we're wrong and why you think we are, because we're not going to shy away from that. We're gonna have a conversation, because that's what we need to do as Christians. We need to be able to talk openly about what it means to follow Christ and what scriptures say and how that applies to things as difficult as death and love and family and culture and all of those things. And so I hope that you know that if you write in, we will take you seriously, and we will, we're not just going to pick and choose the stuff that makes us sound good. Like Jerome disagreed with us pretty hard, and we still talked about it.
Yep.
Because we don't know everything, and we'd rather have a conversation and build each other up and encourage each other and learn from one another than, just sit here and talk about how we're right about everything, because we're not.
No. And that's, and I just think that's one of the cool things about the Bible there's a lot of awesome people of God in there, and pretty much every last one of them screwed up, did something stupid. We're wrong.
So you're saying there's a chance.
So you're saying there's a chance.
So anyways, if you want to get in touch with us, you can email us at masterclassfm at gmail.com. I think that's right.
Yes.
Yeah. Or you can hit us on Twitter if you just got a quick shout out. That's masterclassfm on Twitter.
All right.
And I think that'll do it.
Sounds good.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.